Hello, friends, and welcome to a very special episode. Why is it special? Well, it's because it's episode 10 of the Timist Podcast Series, and it is, in fact, the Season 1 finale. My name is James, and I am the Timist and the host of the thing you're currently listening to. In this season finale, I'll be going at it solo. I figured it would be a fitting topic to end the season by answering the age-old question, hey Timist, how did you actually get into watches? It's a simple question, one we've all probably had to answer before, but as most things usually go, it's never really a clear straight line to reach the answer. It would be my honor to have you join me as I walk you through my journey. To close things out, I tackle a mountain of questions that you fine folks were kind enough to send in. So please, sit back, relax, grab a drink and a snack as we get started. Now, for the past couple of years, I've heard quite a few watch nerds confess that they entered this hobby, in their words, quote, pretty recently, with COVID back in 2020 as being one of the main reasons as to why they turned their focus, their attention, and subsequent bank accounts towards the watch world. Before I dive into my watch genesis story, I just want to make sure that anyone listening right now understands that it doesn't matter if you've been collecting since the age of 5 or if you just discovered this hobby, all are welcome. All of us have differing tastes, and all of us have varying degrees of knowledge and expertise. And that's perfectly fine. No one can know everything, and no one knows everything. You don't have to be able to ramble away reference numbers to be able to enjoy a watch. Likewise, you don't have to know absolutely everything there is to know in order to enjoy this hobby. The barrier to entry is 0. You decide what you like, and you decide what you actually spend your hard-earned money on. No one else gets to decide what you do with your free time and your money. Just be yourself, and I promise you, you will find your people along the way. Now, picture it. It's the mid-90s in Washington State, and I'm 10 years old. I'm old enough to hold a flashlight and fetch random tools from the tool drawer from my grandpa, who was a mechanic. Being raised by my grandparents meant that I was constantly surrounded by cars, wrenches, grease, random car parts, and grandma's amazing cooking. Life was good, or as good as a 10-year-old could imagine what a good life looks like. I went to school, I came home, I ate, I did homework, and then I helped grandpa in the garage. Later in the evening, I played video games, ate more of grandma's home cooking, and tomorrow was going to bring more of the same, and the next day, and so on and so forth. This constant exposure to car parts and tools and visiting random auto parts stores and junkyards inevitably made me fall in love with all things mechanical, and that included watches, given that Grandpa always wore one. Fast forward a couple of years, I'm 15 and I'm very eager to get a job because, well, for one, I had been driving for a few years without a license, and now I was of age to attend driver's ed, which, if I passed the course and the license exam, I'd be eligible to get a driving permit, and of course, that meant getting my own car. My grandparents instilled in me strong life lessons from an early age. Looking back, I'm grateful to have had such amazing role models to help guide me and shape me into the person that I am today. My grandpa always worked, and while he worked, he was thinking of other things to do for work to make more money so that the family was well-fed, well-dressed, and well-rested. My grandma was the quintessential grandma in that she was very reserved. She was spiritual, she was kind, and she was caring. She ran the house. She cooked every single day. She made sure that everyone was clean and well-mannered and basically kept everything in line and on track. She also prayed a lot. She took us to church, constantly advised and taught me kindness, forgiveness, humility, and, of course, to treat people the same way I'd like to be treated. If Grandpa was the strong foundation you could rely on to make things work, to inspire you to dream big, encouraging you to find a way, to find a solution, to find a pathway forward one way or another, Grandma was the soft and kind touch that brought calmness and peace and made sure to keep you rooted in kindness and love. It's cheesy and mushy, I know, but it's all real, and I'm forever grateful to have had them in my life. Anyways, excuse the detour. I just needed to make sure you knew how amazing my grandparents were, how eager I was to get a job, and just how into cars and watches I was from an early age. now with a job in hand, thanks to my aunt, who at the time was the manager at the Redmond KFC, that's Kentucky Fried Chicken, the fast food restaurant for the uninitiated, I had a steady paycheck coming in every 2 weeks. Naturally, I was saving for a car, but that's a story for another time. More importantly, I wanted to buy my first watch. So I turn to my grandpa and I say, "Grandpa, let's go to the mall." And that's exactly what we did. I remember it so vividly. We walked into Sears and browsed the watch displays, and then we kept going and eventually ended up in JCPenney's, and my eyes were immediately drawn to one specific piece. Aviation images adorned the backdrop with the McDonnell Douglas FA-18 Hornet front and center. I knew instantly what it was and what it represented. The navy blue backdrop, the yellow writing, the prominent insignia. This was a watch that joined forces with the U.S. Navy Flight Demonstration Squadron, better known as the Blue Angels. Now, I should mention that before the cars, before the video games, and before the watches, there were airplanes. Rewinding as far back as I can possibly go, I always knew that I was going to be a fighter pilot. Watching movies like Top Gun and Iron Eagle were defining moments in my life. I wanted to be a flyboy. I wanted to go fast. I wanted to feel the thrill and freedom and the sheer speed of carving through the open blue sky in my jet, hitting the afterburners and punching through the sound barrier. That was going to be me. There was no book in my local library or at school about planes that I hadn't read through at least twice. No video game that had anything to do with planes that I didn't own. No plane that flew over our house that I didn't spot with my binoculars. I was obsessed. So of course, now that I was, quote, older, at the ripe old age of 15, I was going to be super attracted to this watch that had something to do with the Blue Angels. Enter the Citizen Skyhawk Blue Angels edition in titanium. I legitimately fell in love with this watch on the spot. It was made by Citizen, a Japanese company known for its precision and accuracy. It was made out of titanium, a material I was and still am obsessed with given its extensive use in aviation and motorsports. It was blue and yellow and gray, and it had both analog hands and digital displays. It was busy, and it looked like it could do anything and everything under the sun, including my homework. So Grandpa leans in. "This one, huh?" I nod furiously. "Yeah, this one." An older gentleman that worked at JCPenney's walks by and asks, "Can I show you anything?" And I point at the Blue Angels showcase stand inside the glass cabinet. "That one, please." He unlocks the cabinet and pulls it out, hands it to me, and I felt titanium for the first time in my life, and it was glorious. The gentleman leans in. "Do you feel that? That's titanium. 40% lighter than steel and stronger. Even the polished links in the bracelet are made out of titanium." Honestly, no extra words were required. No additional info on what the actual watch functions are needed to be shared. In fact, everything around me seemed to fade into a blur, and all sound was muffled and dampened by the industrial quantities of dopamine that was hitting my system. I flipped the watch over in my hands. The Blue Angels insignia adorned the case back. The bezel rotated. It had a world timer function with different cities appearing on a tiny little LCD screen, one of two, I might add. So in short, it was a done deal. I had to have this watch. I clear my throat and I ask the gentleman that was helping us, "How much is the watch?" He reaches into the glass case, pulls out the watch box, and checks the tag. $549. All of the air in my chest escapes as I involuntarily exhale at the sound of the price tag. Keep in mind, I'm 15, just about to turn 16. The year is 2000, and I get paid $8.25 an hour part-time working at a fast food restaurant, going to school, and also trying to save money for a car. In fact, for fun and for extra context, I use the American Institute for Economic Research cost of living calculator. Are you ready? $550 in 2001 comes out to $973.21 in 2024. That is a significant chunk of change for a kid. So I take a moment to collect myself, realize I haven't actually inhaled any air since I heard the price, inhale, and then turn to my grandpa, who in his infinite wisdom says, "We'll figure it out together." And that's exactly what we did. Turns out JCPenney had a layaway program. That's where instead of buying something instantly on credit, you can put down a certain percentage of the total cost. They'll take the item and put it in their safe, and then you can come in and make payments whenever you can. Once the total amount is paid off, you get your item. In this case, the stunning Citizen watch I couldn't stop staring at. Grandpa turns to me and says, "You like the watch, huh?" I nod and I say, "Yes, definitely." He smiles and says, "It's a nice watch, and it looks good on you, but it is pricey. I'll tell you what, I'll put down the initial payment so they can put the watch in the safe for you. And then you can figure out how much from your paycheck you can set aside each week, and you carry on making the payments yourself." I nodded and gave him a big hug and said, "Thank you, Grandpa." I didn't understand it at the time, but he was teaching me a lesson. He was always teaching lessons. And most of the time, he taught by showing and doing versus telling and preaching. He could have bought me that watch on the spot. He had the money. He always had the money, no matter the circumstance or the situation. He made things work in such a way that no one around him ever felt like they were left wanting or needing the things that really mattered. This watch wasn't something that I really needed to have, but the lesson he taught me was. And that's why he did what he did. Years later, as I was reflecting on that day, I realized he taught me the importance of working hard for what you want. That dreams are ethereal until you actually get up and do something about making them a reality. He made me realize that some things need to be sacrificed in order to achieve certain goals. If I wanted to get that watch, that meant less money could be saved towards me getting my car. It also meant I couldn't spend as much money with my friends whenever we'd go out. I needed to figure out a plan and then stick to it. He taught me that nice things cost money, and money is made through work, and good work stands out and is rewarded. So I strive to do good work, to stay focused on my goals, and to drive towards making those incremental payments until the day I'd be able to say, this is my watch. And so time passed by. I dropped by the mall every other week and sometimes put $20 down towards the watch, other times more, sometimes less, but it taught me discipline and focus. And here I am almost 25 years later, still remembering those lessons that Grandpa taught me. I will never forget the day I paid off the watch, or the moment I put it on for the first time, properly sized. I was smiling ear to ear, and the first person I showed it to was my grandpa. He smiled and once again said, "Looks good on you." And that is why my Citizen Skyhawk Blue Angels edition in titanium is truly my most beloved and cherished watch, because of the memories made with my grandpa, because of the lessons learned along the way, and the fact that it was the very first watch I ever worked towards earning and owning. And that, my friends, is exactly how I got into watches. I hope you enjoyed my story. I get emotional whenever I talk about my grandparents. They're sadly no longer with us, but their memory and their love carries on in my life and that of my family on the daily. I'm truly grateful to have had such incredible figures in my life. Now, for something a bit more light, I put out the call on Instagram to see if you fine people had any questions for me that I could help answer, and y'all did not disappoint. Without further ado, and in no particular order, here we go. Philip, who goes by Philip B. Wing on Instagram, says, "There will be a season 2 of the podcast, right?" The short answer is yes, definitely. I just need to take the summer off to stabilize and recharge myself a bit. I'm cooking up a few great episodes and lining up some guests, so definitely stay tuned, and thank you for the question, Philip. Next question comes from Klokketimen on Instagram. They ask, is there a watch from one of the Holy Trinity you are lusting for or dreaming after, or are there other brands that you find more enticing? Tough question, but a good one. I definitely dream of owning at least one watch from each of the big three, Patek Philippe, Audemars Piguet, and Vacheron Constantin. For instance, I'd love to own the 5712 Nautilus in steel, as well as the Royal Oak chronograph in the 41mm version with the blue dial. And I mean, of course, the overseas, but specifically the dual time with the stunning Vacheron blue dial. I think I'm really into blue dials. But here's the problem. It's not that I don't lust for them, of course I do, but the cost of entry for these watches is just so high, even at retail prices. Let's take, for instance, the overseas dual time. It retails for $31,000 in the year of our Lord 2024. For that kind of money, I can buy me a Tudor Black Bay 925 in silver, as well as the Grand Seiko SBGA 211 Snowflake, plus the Tag Heuer Monaco Skeleton in titanium with the red accents, and the weird and rarely seen Panerai Luminor 40 Razor, and still have about $1,000 left, which is good because I, need to insure those watches. That's 4 watches. 4 watches that are actually legitimately on my list of watches I'd like to own someday versus one Vacheron overseas dual time. So the big 3 are a bit of a mythical fantasy for me, at least at this point in time, because let me tell you, it stings a lot less when you part ways with $5,000 than it does with $31,000. So I'd say for now, at least, I'm more interested in watches that are sub 10K, and more specifically, I'm leaning towards the weirder, less common pieces, which also includes micro brands like Sartori Biard. Great question. Thanks for asking. Next question, or more like set of questions, I should say, comes from Adam Lincoln, who goes by Watchcology on Instagram. By the way, check out his Substack. He writes some great articles, and if I may take a moment and give Adam a shout out, he recently got his article published in a blog to watch, so big congrats on that, Adam. Now, Adam asks, has Conor sent his watches in for servicing yet? Well, I saw him last week, and of course I had to prod him, and the short answer is, I think he's running away from that whole train of thought, and he's burying it by purchasing new watch straps for his watches to give them a fresh new aesthetic, but the internals, I think he's dodging that one for the time being. Another question from Adam, what are you guys waiting for from the AD? Honestly, right now, we are not waiting on anything. We recently moved, and we got the Pepsi and the Tiffany OP earlier this year, and that all sort of kind of blew through our entire watch budget for the time being. And everything else that we want is doable without a wait list. So it's really just this whole darn money thing that keeps getting in the way. I really need to find a way to fix that. Last question from Adam. Any sneak peeks at topics or guests for season 2? Yeah, I think I can share a bit. But keep in mind, this is all heavily caveated because people's schedules shift all the time. I'm going to try and speak with other ADs. I'm hoping to meet with Hamza from Watch Charts, and fingers crossed, even Marshall from Wristwatch Revival. Thanks for the awesome questions, Adam. Next question comes in from It's About Timepieces on Instagram. How many times have you watched Snoopy fly across the moon on the case back? So not as often as you'd imagine, given that I wear the watch so much and I don't get to see the case back often because I'm staring at the dial. But I will say that when I do wear it and I happen to be attending a function or an event that has watch nerds present, it always gets fired up, and we all enjoy seeing Snoopy zip around in his command module. He's a ton of fun, as you know. Thanks for the question. Next up, we have a question from Conor himself, Mr. Watches and Blunders. This is kind of weird because I'm doing the Q&A without you, but alas, we shall be reunited soon. Conor asks, what's the worst part of being a watch collector or fan? What do you dislike? Okay, so it seems like I haven't learned my lesson. You keep asking me tough questions and I keep falling into the trap of answering them. Okay, so for me, the worst part of being a watch collector, aside from the literal cost of purchasing these tiny little instruments of awesome, is the constant inner struggle of knowing that I have so many cool watches and quite a few of them being super hard to get, and yet there's still a desire to add more to the collection. As humans, I think we imagine there's this big finish line that we elegantly pass through every time we manage to acquire a watch that we've been lusting for. And there's a crowd, and there's approving nods and handshakes and probably flowers and, confetti of some sort. And then the camera pans up and it fades to black and text pops up that reads, and from that day onwards, they were content and happy and satiated, and they never felt the need to purchase another watch ever again. The end. And yet, here we are. We're looking for larger watch boxes. We're opening up safety deposit boxes. We're building our fantasy watch lists. And of course, this is all self-inflicted, and it's not really the worst thing about being a watch collector. But at this very moment in time, I'm just thinking, I don't think I'll ever stop wanting to buy watches, and I just want to make sure that I don't miss out on other wonderful life experiences as a result. That Flavia isn't affected, that we don't have everything revolving around getting the next watch, but rather keep it in check and make sure it's more of a fun addition that we get to do rather than something that absorbs our focus, our energy, and money. I hope that makes sense. Great question, as always. Next up, we have Ken, who goes by Central Seconds on Instagram. He says, if you were the head of Rolex and you wanted to create a new watch model, what would it be? What size, what material, and what dial? All right, things are getting complicated here. I think I'd go a bit outrageous, but still keep it rooted in something that would make sense for Rolex. So I'd use the Milgauss case to shrink it down to 39 mil, full matte pure white dial with the same stick hour markers that you'd find on the Milgauss. However, the markers along with the hour, minute, and running second hand, as well as the crown logo, would be finished in what would be the Rolex version of Vanta Black. It'd probably be patented as something like BLX. And of course, it would have chromalite lume on the hands and the markers. Then, to make it even more legible, I would add anti-reflective coating on both the top and underside of the sapphire crystal. And we'd have a date complication with a Cyclops because this is a Rolex. Come at me. I await your comments below. As for the material, the whole watch would be made out of, ready, tantalum. So very strong and sturdy with quite a bit of weight to it. And the whole watch would actually be brushed with only key chamfered sections that would receive polish, just enough to catch the light every now and then. A crown guard would be present, of course, and we'd get 200 meters of water resistance. I would add an exhibition case back just because I enjoy them, and it would be called the Endeavor. It would be the toughest, most legible, and most no-nonsense piece in the Rolex catalog, designed to be wearable by almost everyone. You get the idea. This was a lot of fun. Great question, Ken. Thanks for asking. Next up, we have This Guy's Watches on Instagram. He says, toilet paper roll. Does yours feed from the top or the bottom? What say you? This is not a question. This is a declaration of ill intent. If it feeds from the bottom, it's wrong. The end. Next question. Agent Wrist on Instagram says, what is your grail watch that you never want to buy? Plot twist. No one has ever asked me that before. Well done. I honestly think it's still the Patek Philippe 2499 perpetual calendar chronograph in yellow gold. It costs a literal fortune, and if somehow I found the money to buy one, I'd probably never wear it out of fear that something would break and it would cost me another literal fortune to fix it. So unless I win the lottery and have so many bags of cash around me that navigating my immediate environment would be made difficult on account of all the money, I think my answer to your very good question is the Patek Philippe 2499. Thanks for asking. Next up, we have Cove Watches on Instagram. The question is, do you have any controversial watch opinions? Probably. I mean, let's be real. Any opinion can be considered controversial to someone, but I think the one that comes to mind at this very moment is this. I don't understand the MB&F design hype. I never did. That's not to say that I don't respect the technical engineering and creative design solutions required to make watches that look like a bulldog work. But I also don't want a watch that looks like a bulldog on my wrist. That's just me though, personal preference, so no shade towards anyone that does like them. That's the beauty of having so many options. There's something out there for everyone. Thanks for the question. Next up, we have Watching Bonsai on Instagram. He asks, after a successful season 1, are there lessons learned and what can we expect for season 2? Great question. Very thoughtful and very kind of you. You managed to sneak in a little compliment, so thank you for that, Kojay. Definitely, yeah. We've learned lessons. We decided to focus more on just having fun conversations and just enjoying the topic that is watches. Just being able to engage actively with people that are passionate about the hobby has brought in more enthusiasts who in turn have fed us ideas and topics that we really loved exploring. It's been a ton of fun. As for what you can expect, I've mentioned it earlier, but more guests, more varied topics, and a new approach on how I record the sessions. Specifically, I'm hoping to do more Timist Podcast remotes, meaning I actually go out physically to my guests, and we do the show together at their place of choosing. So that means getting out of the comfort zone of the recording studio and therefore being more real. I believe this will open up more avenues of conversation and interesting topics that otherwise just wouldn't be explored just because of the logistical nature of, well, recording a podcast with microphones. So stay tuned for more, and thank you for your excellent questions, Kojay. Next up, we have Time and Shoot on Instagram. They ask, slightly offbeat, but who do you think makes the best bracelets for watches? Definitely not a common question, so thank you for asking. From what I've actually been able to see and hold in real life, Audemars Piguet's Royal Oak bracelets, they are stunning. They are beautifully finished with tons of facets and details. Truly some of the very best. Also, Cartier as well. They make some phenomenal bracelets with adjustability and convenience in mind. No tools necessary. Lastly, I'd also throw in Breitling with their Rouleau bracelet. It's sort of its own unique thing within the watch world and feels great in hand and on the wrist. Sorry, I couldn't pick just one, so you got three. Thank you for asking. Next up, we have 1.11NOF on Instagram. They ask, what do you think of the IWC Top Gun collection? I think it's a really cool line within IWC's portfolio, very aviation themed, which I absolutely love. The various iterations, especially the ceramic ones, are interesting. Some work better than others, in my opinion, as far as like colors go, but overall they are prime aviation pieces if you're into that aesthetic. They're hyper legible and the build quality is undisputed. You're also spoiled for choices. You've got the Oceana, which is the navy blue one, the woodland green, the Mojave desert one, and even the all-white Lake Tahoe, plus the Ceratanian pieces. There's definitely a Top Gun watch that you'll fall in love with if you're a fan. The prices, though, they can get up there real quick. So, be mindful of that. Thank you for asking. And on that note, we wrap up the Q&A portion, and I reckon it's time to conclude episode 10, which, as I mentioned at the start of the episode, is indeed the last one in the Timist Podcast Series Season 1 roster. That's right, we did it. A sincere thank you for hanging out with us for 10 episodes. Hopefully you enjoyed yourself and had some fun along the way. I'll be taking some time off to recharge, but also to record new episodes for Season 2. Aside from Conor resuming his role next to me, I've got some great guests lined up that I think you'll really enjoy hearing from. In the interim, what you can do for me is to give this podcast a rating. Whether you're listening to it on YouTube or Spotify or Apple Podcasts, really whatever your preferred audio platform is, please give it a rating and maybe even drop in a few words so that other watch enthusiasts can find it and hopefully give it a listen. As per usual, please push all the buttons that will help you hear more of us in the future. And if you want to continue the conversation, you totally can. You can find me on Instagram as the Timist IG. Just make sure you put underscores under each word. And also you can connect with Conor. He's on Instagram as well. He's Watches and Blunders, also with underscores. Now, for the last time in Season 1, I'm the Timist. Be well, and I'll catch you in Season 2.